Welcome, everyone, to the Union Federation podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network, where we discuss both Star Trek and the Orville. I'm going to be your captain. My name is Kevin, and I'd like to welcome my co-host and co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network, Mr. Kyle Wagner. What's going on, brother?
Well, first of all, it's good to see you back. I want to apologize if the captain's chair is a little slimy, but I just love the gel so much, and while you were gone, I was just wearing it. And plus, I found that the gel was actually very handy in Klingon acid rock mosh pits. So,
Well, don't use it as hair gel like Ransom does. And speaking of, it looks like it's just going to be us two today, Kyle. And I do have to give you props. Last week, of course, I was in Australia and I couldn't make the show, but I did send you a little message that I want to make sure that you guys mention the Klingon heavy metal band that was in the last episode. And I sent you pictures and stuff. And not only did you include it in the show, it was great. I had another link to the actual human band, metal band that dresses up as Klingons and plays like a heavy metal Klingon music. You found that all on your own, and props to you for doing that. That was a lot of fun listening to that.
it was fun doing the research on it. It was a fun episode. I actually, before we get too far into it, Kevin, because I really enjoyed that episode, at least the A plot. The A plot of that episode was, I think, one of my favorite episodes of Lower. Favorite stories.
It's great when Mariner goes back to her Klingon friends and ties. I love that about her.
So which brings me to a point that I didn't bring up with the show with the girls last week, but I wanted to ask you, because I know this is the final season of Lower Decks, but I'm hoping, whether it's some Trek shorts or we get something from Lower Decks, I need a Lower Decks movie about Mariner's days with the Klingons.
Yeah. That would be fun. I would love some type of flashback on that. A movie would be great too, a one shot. But you guys did talk about like the B plot with the bird guy and the eating and stuff, and I kind of checked out during that B plot too. I was just like, give me the A plot too, because I think Haley said it best, was that like we didn't really get a lot of character development from that character, and so he was just kind of an afterthought. But it was nice to see the captain, I'm forgetting her name real nice, have a few moments with that though. But it was all about the Klingons and stuff, and that was great.
And more importantly, Kevin, as you are now back on this podcast after your travels, where are you at with your Boeing stash?
What's funny is, like, didn't he admit to dyeing his hair purple, right? So why is his half-ass stash and beard purple? Is he trying that hard? I don't know. That was funny.
A little just for Starfleet, and it makes it all good.
I like how that's becoming a theme in this final season, and there's something else that's hanging out there that we'll discuss later in the show. But I just want to give my thoughts real quick. I'm enjoying this season. There really hasn't been a miss episode for me. The last episode was definitely one of my favorites, but that first one, when they meet the alternate universe crew and how it's kind of affected a couple of them going in through the rest of the season, it's been a good 5 episodes, and I'm gonna talk about where we are halfway through the season later in this show. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the rest of this. So yeah, definitely. Well, we are, of course, discussing Starbase 80. This is episode 5 of season 5. This is episode 102 of the Union Federation. And here on the Fandom Podcast Network, and of course also on the BQN. And we are celebrating Lower Deck season 5, an adventure 5 seasons in the making. And we do have, of course, some stuff that has arrived on the Fandom Podcast Network and coming soon that is related to Union Fed. And we did want to tease, of course, after we do our run of Lower Decks season 5 here, we will return in the first week in January. It's a little project that Amy and I have been working on. We're going to return to the Orville. This is, of course, a Union Federation, a Star Trek and Orville podcast. And there are rumors, Kyle, that they were supposed to go or will go into pre-production of the next season of Orville, according to Scott Grimes. So we'll see what happens, right?
I see. This is what I don't get about this, because I don't believe Scott Grimes is lying to us. But come on, Seth. If Scott, you and Scott are like tight. I mean, you're in everything together. And I mean, I think almost Scott has some cachet over you now because Scott did sing the new Baywatch theme. But but no, I mean, come on,
Oh
just
my God, you'll keep bringing that up.
come on, him and Debbie Gibson singing the Baywatch theme. I mean, what? It's epic. But no, I mean, come on, Seth, say something at this point. There's got to
I'm
be
guessing
something.
he's waiting until the when they actually start doing it and start
Mhm.
teasing maybe a set picture or something. But we are going to be returning to the Orville in January, and one of the things that we're going to do, and I'm going to tease this here, we are doing USS Orville crew profiles. It's a limited 10 episode Union Federation project we have going on here, and we're going to be highlighting each of the main character crews. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be discussing the 2 episodes. We're going to highlight 2 episodes of each, so you don't have to watch a lot. And Amy and I went over and picked 2 episodes each, and we have a couple of honorable mentions. And what we'll try and do is we'll let you guys know what 2 episodes that we're going to cover. So as you're listening to this, you can watch those 2 episodes and then join us for the podcast. And of course, the first one that we will be discussing, the first crew profile, is a Lieutenant Alara Katan. She had a couple of good episodes, and we're going to highlight her and those. And this is going to be a good way, Kyle, for us to return to the Orville without having to watch all of the Orville like I did preparing for this limited series.
Oh, there's not that much Orville to watch. So, I mean, truthfully, probably we'll have at least watched a quarter of it with this. But since we are starting with Alara, does that mean we have to bring jars of pickles on for those on that podcast?
That will be your prerogative, Kyle. I want to see that. I want to see you make that happen. So yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And of course, recently we had a lot of fun with our limited 9 episode run of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Every 2-part episode that was reviewed. Of course, we did start with Best of Both Worlds, went on to Redemption, Unification. We also did Time's Arrow, Chain of Command, Birthright, Descent, Gambit, and then our final episode was going over all of those and giving our final reviews. And also we discussed some of our other favorite non-TNG 2-part episodes. That was a fun run, Kyle.
Yes, it was. Like I was saying while you were gone, it was so fun to kind of go back to TNG because I really haven't revisited TNG in a good while. So it was kind of nice to go back down that hole. And I'm going to say it too, the final part we did of that, where we talked about other Star Trek 2-parters, was a lot of fun as well.
Yeah. Well, this episode we are talking about Star Trek Lower Deck Season 5, Episode 5, Starbase 80. And let's get into our first away mission. Now, of course, spoiler alert here. Have you watched this episode? Well, if not, spoiler alert. If you haven't, go ahead and watch it. It's a quick little watch, 25 minutes. Come back and join us here. Otherwise, prepare to be spoiled. This is our episode review. And Kyle, this is our Admiral's Log section here. If you can go ahead and give us the Admiral's Log episode synopsis of Star Trek Lower Deck Season 5, Episode 5, Starbase 80?
But I just got some corn dogs. Yes, Starbase 80. With their navigation process not functional, the Cerritos crew have no choice but to dock at Starbase 80 and make repairs, or they could travel to the next starbase, which would be some like 400 years away via impulse power. While there, the crew of the Cerritos begin falling into a zombie-like trance that Mariner believes is the Starbase 80 curse. But it turns out it's not Starbase 80 that is cursed at all, but the Cerritos crew, who are infected with an anaphasic consciousness, thanks Sub Rosa. With the assistance of the Starbase 80 crew, the entity is captured and communicated with, while the Cerritos and Starbase 80 support each other's repair needs.
All right. Well done, Kyle. All right. So, first reactions to this episode, dude.
So, I'm going to be honest with you. This is probably the first episode this season that did not fully hit with me. It's
Really?
I thought maybe it was a little bit too silly, and I think I know, but I think I know what my biggest issue was with this. They made such a big deal about Starbase 80 in the season premiere, and the captain's reactions and her worries about Starbase 80, and it really felt like they downplayed it in this episode, and they dealt more with Mariner's fear about Starbase 80. And so I just felt like they kind of played up the wrong angle with Starbase 80 in this episode. It was fun. I love going back and seeing some of the old things that Starbase 80 has because it's so antiquated. But I did feel like they kind of missed the opportunity of where they should have went with this episode.
Okay. You know, I enjoyed it. I thought it was great to see this because if you think about it, I think I saw this comparison somewhere reading the research for this, that Starbase 80 is basically like the lower decks people, you know.
Yeah.
It's you know?
Actually, I think they might be worse than the lower decks people at this point.
Yeah. But you know, I love all the differences of Starbase 80 and how it's just become like this. Even of all people, Mariner not wanting to be there because she's usually a go-getter. She likes getting into action and stuff. So you know, and it was fun to kind of revisit some of the looks of like older uniforms, which we'll get into later. We had a couple of cool guest stars as well. And throwbacks to other characters and situations, which we'll get into later, Kyle.
Kevin, I just want to remind you, we don't always call them older uniforms. Sometimes they're just vintage.
Vintage, yeah. Well, let's go ahead and get into some Star Trek trivia here, Kyle. We got some fun stuff to talk about here. So, yeah, let's do that right now. All right. So, Kyle, why don't you go ahead and get us started with the first one?
Okay, well, Dr. Harrison Horseberry, Tarchanian parasite, is the same one that affected Geordi LaForge in Identity Crisis. The Tarcharian 3 parasite is from the third season of Star Trek The Next Generation. The episode is Identity Crisis that came out in 1991. It was responsible for the disappearance of a Federation colony in 2362 when it transformed them into primitive reptile-like life forms. Unknown to the colonists, the planet had an indigenous population, the parasite being their method of reproduction, and their unique biology made them invisible to the naked eye and masked their life signs from sensors. The USS Victory investigated the colony after contact was lost. The away team they sent down, which included a young ensign, Geordi LaForge, was infected with the parasite. The parasite had a long incubation period of 5 years. When it manifested, it compelled those infected to return to the planet in 2367. This included LaForge and his former commanding officer, Lieutenant Susanna Lichtgen.
I loved this call out, Kyle, because this is one of my maybe top 10 episodes of TNG. Yeah. I like it because it's creepy, and it's also, but I like how they go about investigating it, you know, and they use the holodeck room, and you know, and there's that one creepy part where there's a shadow that Geordi can't identify. It's like, wait, what is that? Who is that? You know, and the two of the characters that are the infected people, if you're part of the LA area, there's a very famous radio show with hosts called Mark and Brian, and they were guest starring as one of the Tarkanian zombified people. And also, too, with the Star Trek action figures came out, there's a really cool glow-in-the-dark version of Geordi that has this, you know, translucent color to it. And back in my day when I used to work for Decipher, Kyle, that made the Star Trek collectible card game, there was a special tin that came out, and there was a version of his card that actually had glow paint on it where you could, you know, as that character. And do you remember that episode well?
Oh, I love that episode. First of all, Geordi has always been one of my favorite characters from Next Gen, so anything that was focusing on him was great. First, I thought the makeup was done very well. And in fact, Kevin, I'm noticing a tinge of blue on you, but that just might be the light coming from your monitor.
Well, I've been getting over this parasite that I got in Australia. So I got 5
wait,
years, right?
Wait. Kevin, in 5 years, if you have a strong call to go to New Zealand, we got to talk.
All right, the next trivia is kind of an obvious and fun one. The Quartermaster's store has a huge pile of red uniform shirts on the floor. Running joke in Star Trek is that anyone wearing a red shirt was likely to be killed in a away mission, hence the abundance of red shirts.
Vintage red shirts, Kevin.
Vintage, yes. And you know, if you're listening to this podcast, make sure you check out the video on YouTube, because we have a classic picture of Spock and Kirk coming down to a bunch of dead guys, of course, wearing the red shirts there. Okay, Kyle, next bit of trivia. What do we got?
Well, of course, the running joke from previous episodes about Starbase 80 having outdated equipment, uniforms, and, well, basically everything is continued in this episode. Previously, Starbase 80 crew members were shown wearing old engineering jumpsuits seen in early seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation and using old Type 15 shuttle pods. This episode, SB-80, using extremely outdated things from the 22nd century, like the disinfectant gel. On me. And some personnel are wearing mid 22nd century style Starfleet uniforms from Star Trek Enterprise.
That was the first thing I noticed. Was like, why is they wearing a Star? Because they had specific uniforms on a TV series, and they look sharp. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's an Enterprise one. And I was like, okay, I see where they're going with this.
Yeah, exactly. The station's consoles and equipment are all mid 23rd century style. The quartermaster store was selling uniforms from dead officers and had 2250 style uniforms from Star Trek Strange New Worlds, 2260 uniforms from Star Trek The Original Series, including a huge pile of Security Redshirt Division uniforms in the back, 2270 style uniforms from Star Trek The Motion Picture, and the 2280 to 2350 style first seen in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Okay.
Just remember, Kevin, some of these are twist to activate twist controls.
Okay, so I have an idea. You know what they should do with Starbase 80? First of all, the Federation needs to go there, kind of clean it up a little bit, make sure everything works, and they should just turn it into like a retro tourist attraction. Because even have video games in there.
Just real quick, because the one thing I did like about this episode was them realizing the Cerritos has been treated like Starbase 80 has in a way. So
exactly.
They're like cousins of each other in a roundabout kind of way.
All right, the next bit of trivia has a throwback to a certain movie, Kyle. The soundtrack for this horror-tinged episode quotes from Michael Kamen's score for the sci-fi horror cult classic Event Horizon. Kyle, I think I saw this movie. I don't remember much of it, but stuff goes bad. Do you remember?
It's been a long time since I've seen this movie, but yeah, essentially things literally go to hell.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think they should have had Mariner say something about Event Horizon sometime in this episode just to really hammer it home.
All right, Kyle, what's the next bit we got?
Next bit, we got some Trek tropes tributes. The ship experiences a malfunction that prevents it from attending a Starfleet conference is a definite trope. The episode most clearly mirrors Captain Picard's half-hearted attempts to make it in time for a meeting of Starfleet admirals and phantasms.
That was another creepy TNG episode. You had the Troy cake. You had Beverly Crusher sipping Will Riker's brain through a straw. Weird stuff was happening that one.
Yeah, I think they might have had a little something extra in their desserts when they wrote that episode.
I'll shoot off some canon connections here. The Cerritos was headed to Casperia Prime for a captain's conference when its navigation problems waylaid it to Starbase 80. Casperia Prime is the new vacation destination for the Alpha Quadrant. First reference in DS9's Inquisition. Starbase 80 has not been significantly updated since the 2260s, which means much of the aesthetics matches the original series era, including the wall comms, colorful pipes, slanted Jeffrey tubes, not to mention those old school style rod, what do you call it? Elevators. Tube things.
When you looked at walls, were you able to taste the date on it?
God, no. So there was a lot of fun shout outs there. Kyle, give us the observation lounge mention here.
So Lord X absolutely nails its decon chamber scene, as we had no doubt that they would. Ransom's obsession with the gel in that scene, and then the rest of the episode is hilarious. Check me out, says Boimler. I'm a total T'Pol over here. Kevin,
hold on, Kyle. You got to get the name right. It's T'Pol.
Sorry, it's been a bit since I've watched it. Do you need me to get your back, Kevin?
Yeah, please. I can't reach that
spot. That one spot. Yeah, I understand.
But yeah, if you're watching the video here, we have a slide from Enterprise where I guess after they've rubbed each other down, they're just sitting in the sauna room, decontamination room.
Oh, can you imagine when they finally got that right for teleporters, the celebrating that was going on in Starfleet?
Yeah. Also, go ahead, Kyle.
I was going to read the next one if you didn't mind, Kevin.
Go for it. Yeah.
Because Noelle Wells was working overtime in this episode because not only is she she is not only doing her main character voice, she's also voicing the Starbase 80 and Cerritos computers in this episode. You think she got a triple
Read the
paycheck?
next one too.
Mariner rightly points out that as a 30-something
It's Elorian.
Elorian, that's right. Elorian Cassia Knox doesn't have anything special about her. A hilarious joke in reference to the fact that Elorians we've met before in Star Trek only appear to have distinctive behaviors because of their age and wisdom.
And we've had 2 references to Elorian. Of course, the most famous is Guinan, and then also Dr. Tolian Sorn from Star Trek Generations as well. So
I have a question for you, Kevin. Do you think there was maybe ever a Guinan Mariner meetup? Because I think that could have been quite interesting.
That would have been really cool, especially if they were like old friends, So because she mentions Guinan like she knows her, sort of, but Mariner's kind of like our Avatar. We've seen all of Star Trek, and it's like she's watched all of Star Trek, so she gets all the references.
Kevin, can you bring up that last slide real quick too?
Sure. Yeah.
No. Yeah. There we go. I just want to know too. I know we're gonna get into it a little bit later, but since we have it up on the screen, not only do we have the Boeing stash, we have the Boeing patch, the Boeing patch now.
Oh, you mean on the chin?
On the chin, he ran a little Boeing soul patch, or Boeing patch, as I want to call it.
Yes. All right, let's go ahead and hit away mission number 2 here. All right, this is our main episode discussion here, Kyle. Going to give a shout out to TrekCore. They have been wonderful in supplying a lot of fun stuff for us to use and borrow. I want to make sure you check out their website. They got some great articles there. I love visiting their site. But we got some Starbase 80. This is going to be our first discussion here, Kyle. And I want to say Starbase 80. It's an episode about not jumping to conclusions and judging a book by its cover. The Starbase 80 crew are weird, and they do not fit into the traditional Starfleet box of how a crew like this should behave, but they do allow their crew members to flourish, to get a second chance, and to find their own way a little outside the norm. So before we get into some of the stuff I found on Memory Beta about Starbase 80, Kyle, I was kind of like thinking to myself, like, why hasn't this Starbase 80 been like invaded by like either Romulans or Klingons? And I'm kind of getting the feeling like, do they really want it?
It's kind of one of those things that probably has come up in negotiations and stuff like that. And it's like, can we come back to that? And it just gets forgotten about.
Like I said earlier, they need to make Starbase 80 into a tourist, because if you think about it, it's a living museum.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of this house here in Santa Barbara, Kyle, that no one visited for like 40 or 50 years. The heiress that owned it passed away and hadn't visited it since 1956 or something like that. So the whole house stayed like that. And so it was this time capsule until recently they've turned it into a museum, and you can actually tour it now. You pay your money or whatever and go tour it. It kind of reminds me of that. It's like a throwback to everything. I mean, how cool would it be? Because we see like Mariner, and we also see Boimler kind of geeking out on stuff like this.
Yeah, the problem is if you left Rutherford there, he'd just fix everything and actually probably end up upgrading it. So
true. So Starbase 80, this is information I got from Memory Beta about, and this is part of the Wiki franchise here about Starbase 80. It was a 24th century Federation starbase in Starfleet service, a fleet starbase type space station facility located in the Xerxes star system as coordinates 2.29 and 5.38 W, somewhere in the galaxy's alpha or beta quadrants. History and specifications. In the year 2365, while Guinan was waiting at the starbase, see, even Guinan's been there, for her Federation starship USS Enterprise D to pick her up, she was told a story by Jake Stutzman. The very same story was later told by Geordi LaForge, where he claimed credit for Stutzman's actions. And this is the TNG novel Fortune's Light. Now, whether you consider that canon or not, I do. Anyway, when the USS Voyager encountered the USS Equinox in the Delta Quadrant, Captain Ransom said, this is a different Ransom, by the way, said that he had previously been on an Intrepid class as a science officer pro tem for a visit while at Starbase 80, and that is in the Voyager novelization of Equinox. Starbase 80 had an unpopular reputation as an assignment for Starfleet personnel. In the year 2380, Dr. Tiana suggested that Ensign Beckett Mariner transfer to Starbase 80, as it seems like she always goofed around. Lower Decks episode, Terminal Provocations. Mariner was again threatened to be transferred to Starbase 80 by Commander Jack Ransom if she failed in her task to run the recruitment booth. That was in the episode Reflections. And 2381, Captain Carol Freeman transferred Mariner to Starbase 80 after thinking she betrayed her trust to a reporter. Not long after arriving, Mariner reassigned from Starfleet, and that was in the episode Trusted Sources. In a personal log, Mariner claimed that the station reeked of shrimp. Instagram, Star Trek Lower Decks post, Beckett Mariner personal log. And last but not least, in the year 2411, Starbase 80 was a Starfleet-type space station located in the Beta Quadrant Celis Factor Klingon Civil War mission Partesians. I think that's the original series there. So, Kyle, we've had a lot of stuff about this 80. Give me your thoughts on Starbase 80.
First of all, I just want to say that with Starbase 80 having no replicators, I am still not quite sure that the food passes the health inspection.
Yeah, what's up with that? I mean, shouldn't that have been installed sometime after a certain time?
Yeah. Starbase 80, I see this as kind of a reflection of like modern business chains, like maybe like restaurants or corporate entities that have like many stores, like a Best Buy or something like that. There's always that one that just never gets updated. It's antiquated. When you find it, it's like it's like walking into an office that still has shea carpet and wood paneling, and that's what Starbase 80 is. But it makes it fun too because they can have the jokes with it. But it's just that assignment that you just don't want to go to because it's like, yeah, once you go there, you're basically in Starfleet oblivion.
So, okay, so I was trying to put aside. So, the funny thing about this episode is Starbase 80 became more of a problem because of what the Cerritos brought, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to find what was bad about Starbase 80 there. I thought there was some fun, quirky people. I didn't find anything really weird. I love the room that the gravity was wrong, and so everyone was like walking on the ceiling. I feel like I might have fit in there, Kyle.
Well, a lot of us probably would have, but as I was watching this episode and what you're talking about too, I'm like, should we have a Lower Decks where Jellicoe gets assigned to Starbase
80? He probably no, because he'd probably just destroy it. I mean, I don't think he had. Yeah,
it might break him.
What I thought would be kind of funny though is if we find out that Starbase 80 has like some badass like weaponry to defend itself, or some like super secret like device on it that can do like bad stuff if it is like threatened in some way. I don't know. I hope we don't see the end of Starbase 80. I found this episode fascinating for all the stuff that was in it, all the different characters. Like I said, dude, they need to turn this into a tourist attraction. Just kind of like, what we saw in the last season of Picard, where all the old ships were hanging out, and Geordi was, tinkering away on the USS Enterprise D. You need to leave everything the way it is. Maybe make sure the turbo lifts are working and put in a damn food replicator, because there was like a cool promenade in there with like shops and stuff like that. I was like all for it. I would totally visit this place.
Yeah, I again too, as cool as fun as Starbase 80 was. Again, this is kind of where I was like, my one issue with the episode I want to go back to is with Captain Freeman was, they made such a point of her freaking out about Starbase 80 in that first episode, and they even mentioned it in a couple of the other episodes in this season that it's still weighing on her, and so I again, that ended up feeling like it was just a very minimal side story in this episode, like it was kind of forgot about. And that's the one, again, I feel like that was an opportunity. They instead of having Mariner be so paranoid about the curse of Starbase 80, I would have rather dealt with the Freeman more in the Freeman issue of what her fears of Starbase 80 are.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Kyle, because thinking about stuff that's been kind of pushed aside, and maybe um, wondering like what's going on. One of the things that was notably absent from this episode, and keep in mind, this episode was great because Starbase 80 has been alluded to. Well, there's been another thing that's been alluded to that we did not get in this episode. Notably absent from this episode was any connection to the Space Pothole season arc, after we got a tease last week that the rifts in space are being made by persons unknown. And we've had a similar thing last season. There was an ongoing thing about was it some ships being captured or destroyed and stuff like that. I need you to help me out here, Kyle, because I was of course in Australia this last month, and I was forgetting this theme that was going on. We've got several themes going on. We got this, of course. We've got Starbase 80, and then we've got Boimler's facial hair. What do you remember of the space potholes in the previous episodes?
Well, obviously, in last week's episode, it's mentioned because we're actually legitimately investigating them at that point, and they needed the help from the Klingons. We find out too in one of the other episodes, there's that microverse where you had the small little Starfleet ship that was causing the giant 20-sided die, basically causing havoc.
Right.
So the second episode didn't really mention much, but I think that was kind of intentional because they kind of wanted to throw you off the scent of this being a major plot. But it's been mentioned in every episode, and I even think in a way it's still mentioned. It still ties in with this episode because of the Starbase 80 connection from episode 1. So I think it's kind of there. I was actually kind of surprised because I thought probably what they might do too is once they were starting to communicate with the entity in this episode, that it might have been from one of these dimensional pockets as well. So I was a little surprised by that, but I really think what you're going to see is this is probably going to be like the final 3 episodes of this season that's going to be the big story arc.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I was trying to remember that, and I watched them while I was over there in Australia. I didn't have time to like rewatch them and kind of look at the the details and stuff. So Kyle, the next topic that we have here, and I do want to give another spoiler warning here because I don't know if some people know this, but they did release all the names of the episodes for the rest of this season, final season 5 of Star Trek Lower Decks. And I'm going to show a picture of that. So if you don't want to know what they're called, just kind of turn away for a little bit here and don't listen for the next few minutes. But the reason why I'm bringing this up, Kyle, is because we're in the halfway point of the final season of Lower Deck Season 5. And I kind of want to get a stance of where we are on it. And maybe kind of ask about each other about what we kind of want to see through the final last half of the season. So I'm going to go ahead, just spoiler warning here. I'm going to say the names of the episodes and also show the graphic on the screen here. Okay, here we go. So obviously we just had Starbase 80. The next episode, season 6, is called Of Gods and Angels. Episode 7 is called Fully Dilated. Episode 8 is called Upper Decks. Episode 9 is called Fiju Quest. And the last episode, episode 10, on December 9th, 19th of 2024, is called The New Next Generation. So Kyle, what I want to ask you is, we're at the halfway point here. Where are you feeling about the season thus far? Give me your thoughts on that.
I think it's been a very solid season. I think they are doing a lot of things to try to wrap up some loose threads. I mean, there's so many loose threads with this show that there's no way they're going to wrap all of them up because the loose threads in this show are so, they pull from such obscure things, and that's one of the reasons why the show is so great too. But there's so many obscure things they pulled from that just some of the stuff's going to hang out. We only have 5 episodes left, and unless one of these episodes is like a 45-minute episode, which I highly doubt, there's going to be some things hanging out there. But I think we have a few key points. So the Fisher issue with these Fishers, which looks like episode 9 might be really dealing with that. The Boimler issue, he still has the pad from the alternate dimension. Obviously, we still have him in his quest.
I forgot about that. I'm glad you. Sorry to interrupt. I forgot about that. I'm glad you mentioned that.
We still have his quest to get his ultimate Riker facial hair.
True. You just made me snort.
I think we have Mariner taking those final steps to becoming what she's actually destined to be.
Right.
Boimler as well in his own way, and I think too what you might see some things happened between Rutherford and Tendi and a few other things. But again, this is Lower Decks, and this is one of the beauty things about Lower Decks. You can think you know what's coming, and they're going to throw you a complete 180 because it's Lower Decks, and they do that.
I was saying to myself earlier, Kyle, I'm happy that we at least got 5 seasons, and that with 10 episodes each season, that's 50 episodes. But there's a part of me that is going to want more. I don't know if we're going to get more, but this is becoming one of my favorite Star Trek series, Kyle. I love how they're doing it. I love how it's fast paced. I love the character development that we're getting from these characters. I love, obviously, all the call outs, the references, the Easter eggs. And that's one of the things that this show really excels at without, making it dull or, fan service, too fan servicey, which, in my opinion is a lame phrase because, give me all the fan service. I don't care, especially with this show. I've been very happy with the first half of this season. There hasn't really been a skip an episode. There's maybe been like A plot, B plot stuff where I enjoyed one more than the other. Like the last episode, I preferred, of course, the A plot with the Klingon thing. Dude, we had Targs wagging their tail, eating from a trough. I mean, come on, that was great. And a Klingon metal band. I love that. You said they may not wrap everything up. And I think that would be a good thing if they don't. The fissure thing, of course, I think they have to. But with some of these titles like Upper Decks and the new Next Generation, are they going to have a new crew for the Cerritos? Is the Lower Decks going to finally be promoted to where they're not considered part of Lower Decks? They get their own quarters, each.
Or do they get reassigned to other ships?
Exactly. Yeah, great call there. So that's where I was going at. So I hope we do see that because, even though they won't be Lower Decks anymore, I don't mind if they keep calling it Lower Decks because it would be nice to see that crew get onto a higher profile ship, like a Galaxy class ship or something.
So one thing I do want to say too, since we're talking about this, because they have established that it's possible now. I really hope this isn't, when Lower Decks ends, it's not the end of these characters. Because I'm going to be honest, I would love to see more dimensional hopping with Boimler and Mariner, where they meet up with other time frames in Star Trek. Because I think Jack Quaid and Tawny Newsom were so great in that episode of Strange New Worlds. I would love, especially since Tawny is one of the writers on Starfleet Academy.
Yeah.
I would love for them to work that out somehow, where there's some dimensional rift from something from Discovery, or Mariner finds the Red Angel armor and accidentally sets it off and appears.
That crossover with Star Trek Strange New Worlds was just so much fun. Where they got to see live action versions of them. That was wonderful.
Yeah. So I hope they do find ways to incorporate these characters into future Trek projects in one way or the other.
I agree. Well, the next thing I did want to give a shout out to is we always like to talk about the cast if we can here. And we did have some guest stars here. We had Nicole Byer, who played Cassia Knox. We had Liam McIntyre as Harrison Horseberry. We had Oscar Montoya as Mackler. And we had the return of Stephen Root, played Gene Jagoblowski. I didn't really recognize Stephen Root's voice right away, but if you remember, Kyle, he was in one of the Star Trek episodes, 2-parters, where he played a Klingon, and he might have had another part. A lot of people may know him as the stapler guy in Office Space or the boss in News Radio. Has so many wonderful acting parts.
Dodgeball,
yes.
But Kevin,
look at that, it's L for Love.
But Kevin too. Do you realize now we have had Spartacus on Star Trek?
Spartacus, do tell, Kyle.
Liam McIntyre. He took over the role of in the Spartacus TV show when the original.
That's where I remember that name. Good call, Kyle. I didn't realize.
He took over, unfortunately, when the original lead of Spartacus passed away from cancer.
That's right.
But Liam McIntyre was Spartacus for the majority of that show's run.
Well, let's go ahead and let's wrap things up here, guys. All right, this is the Union Federation podcast. Of course, this is episode 202, celebrating Star Trek Lower Decks, episode 5, Starbase 80. You got to say it like that. And of course, we don't have any ready room yet, Kyle, but I hope you do. Do you have any news on that?
I have not had any news on that, but pause the brakes on the ready room thing, because there's something I need to say about this, because Lower Decks, I think, has established itself as a true part of the Star Trek universe. If there is not even one episode of the Ready Room, like when after the Lower Decks finale or something like that, I think it is totally disrespectful to Lower Decks. And
I agree.
I
They've had the cast on before. Are they just waiting until the final
don't,
finale?
and that's what I don't know, and they haven't said anything. I'm hoping that's the case. I mean, I would this cast deserves to have their moment.
I
And
agree.
I'm not talking about just in animated. This cast deserves to be on the Ready Room, getting recognized where we can see their faces, having that discussion about what Lower Decks has done for Star Trek. Because
I
think
would love
I
if they
personally,
had the full cast on the couch there, dude. That would be so cool.
even if we just have our four main people and throw in maybe Jerry O'Connell and Don Lewis,
Right.
I could work with that. But if I'm being honest with you, I don't think anybody had any expectations of Lower Decks becoming what it has become. They got, oh, Mike McMahon, this is going to be silly, it's going to be fun, it's going to last 1 or 2 seasons and be done. And I think the especially Mariner and Boimler have become so cemented and loved within the Star Trek community, and I think Lower Decks has just become something special within the Star Trek community. This show deserves its props and credit, just like Discovery got when it ended. Just like, I get it. It's a little bit different with live action and the weight it carries, but these guys deserve their moment. There needs to be. I am begging you, Paramount, whoever's calling the shots there, give us at least something for the finale with Will Wheaton and the crew,
I
because
hope so.
they deserve it.
Agreed. Yeah. Well, as I teased earlier, the next episode is called Of Gods and Angels. And of course, we are celebrating season 5, the final season of Lower Decks, episode 5, Starbase 80. Kyle, give me your final thoughts on Starbase 80. 80?
It was a solid episode. It was not one of my favorite Lower Decks episodes, but I thought it was a solid episode. It's probably my weakest episode of this season, but
That surprises me to hear you say that. I thought you would have really
I've really enjoyed the first 4 episodes of this season. I mean, if I'm talking about just this season combined, I don't know where I'd put it, what episode I would put it over, to be honest, because I think it's been that good. And I guess I had some expectations within my own brain about what they were going to do with Starbase 80 and that they didn't execute. But again, I'm not saying it's a bad episode. There's better episodes this season, and that's fine like I said, a bad episode this season is still a decent episode. So,
it's funny. I'm looking at the first 5 episodes. You got Dos Cerritos, Shades of Green, The Best Exotic Nanite Hotel, A Farewell to Farms, and of course, the Starbase 80. They're all pretty good. If I had to pick a least favorite, maybe 3, The Best Exotic Nanite Hotel. I'll have a shout out to the movie on that one. But still, it's a good episode. But Starbase 80 for me is definitely, I would say, maybe my third favorite behind Farewell to Farms and Dos Cerritos. But it's been a pretty good season thus far, Kyle. So yeah, I'm happy.
Kevin, the only thing I'll say is let's see how you feel about it after you have to go get some of the bats out of Starbase 80.
I would totally visit Starbase 80, dude. I would make the most of it for sure. All right, let's go ahead and get into some subspace signals here and wrap things up. All right, this is a Union Federation on the Fandom Podcast Network. Kyle, we also are with the BQN. But guess what? The Fandom Podcast Network and me and you, Kyle, are now on Blue Sky. Tell people how we can get a hold of you.
You can find me on Blue Sky under A Kyle W. I actually have been on Blue Sky for a while, just kind of got forgot about because there's so much social media out there these days. But you know what? This is one that I know a lot of people are going to for a lot of different reasons. And you know what? Here at the Fandom Podcast Network, it's about being able to connect with all our fans wherever they are at. So yes, we are on Blue Sky because we know there's some phenomenal people on Blue Sky, and we want to make sure that they feel part of the Fandom Podcast Network.
Yeah. You can find me, of course, on Blue Sky at Spartan Phoenix, not underscore, but everything else, X, Instagram, Threads, Discord, and Letterboxd, find me at Spartan_Phoenix. And also, too, if you haven't already, please check us out on YouTube. Please subscribe, please share, please like. We'd appreciate that, and comment. And our master feed for all of our audio podcasts can be found at fpnet.podbean.com. And Union Federation, please join our Union Federation Star Trek and Orville podcast Facebook group. And you can email us at unionfederation@gmail.com. We are also on Instagram and X. Make sure you check us out there. And please check out Haley on Instagram and Blue Sky at Chucky01D. And Amy Nelson is at Miss Amy Nelson on X, Instagram, Amy Nelson 522. And you can find her at the BQN podcast on Blue Sky. And of course, you can find BQN also on Instagram and their Facebook BQN Collective listeners group there as well. But we also want to let people know too, hey, see this cool t-shirt I got here, the Union Federation t-shirt? Support us also on TeePublic. You can go to TeePublic and just search the Fandom Podcast Network. If you like all of our shows, we got merch with several of our other shows there. Bloody Kings, Type 40, Couch Potato Theater, of course, Union Federation, Time Warp, Lethal Mullet. You can get hats and mugs and cups and tapestries when you buy those shirts through TeePublic. And also, too, they have a lot of sales, a lot of like 30% off. We get a little kickback, helps us keep the lights on here at the Union Federation Starship here, Kyle. So
dilithium crystals are not cheap.
Exactly. So yeah, help us out. So this is, of course, we've just been discussing episode 5 of Lower Decks, season 5, Starbase 80. Kyle, thank you very much. We will see you again next week, sir. And this is the weirdest ship as well as the Starbase 80, weirdest spaceship. And,
I have gel in places I probably shouldn't mention.
Yeah, leave that to yourself. All right, guys, join us again next week for Union Federation, where we will, of course, celebrate the next episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. Until next time, we'll see you next week.